Hello, and welcome to Lunchtime Literature, Writing for Children. First, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boorong people, who are the custodians of this land. We acknowledge and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We recognize and respect their cultural heritage, their beliefs, and their continued relationship to this unceded land, its waters and community, and that these connections are substantiated through oral traditions containing knowledge that should be centered. So I am super excited to warmly welcome everyone out there in our digital audience to the Emerging Writers Festival's Lunchtime Literature Writing for Children panel. And I'd love to introduce our panel, or rather our session today is going to involve us introducing our panel, asking questions about the beautiful books that our panel members have written to touch on the importance of representation and diversifying children's literature. The audience will be able to have the opportunity to ask questions through the hashtag EWF21 on Twitter, or through the chat function on YouTube or whatever platform you're on, so that you can chat with us and ask questions and join in the fun. So let's jump in and introduce our amazing panel. First, we've got Huda Hayek, who is the second youngest of 7 children, born to Lebanese Australian parents. She was born in Adelaide, grew up in Perth, and now she is in Melbourne. She struggled initially with reading and writing through her earliest years at school, but knew from the time she was a little girl that she wanted to work with words. Love that alliteration. After completing her degree in mass communications, journalism, and public relations, she went on to graduate with a degree in teaching. She has worked as a primary school teacher in Melbourne's West and as a journalist, but above all, writing stories involving unique kids with unique backgrounds has been her passion. Huda enjoys exploring themes of identity, what it means to be Australian, Muslim, and Lebanese. She also enjoys being a little bit mischievous, and I just can't wait to chat with her today about today's topic, as well as her new book, her new novel, Huda and Me. And we also have, and I'm really, really pleased to have Julianne Negri on our panel. Julianne is her debut children's novel is The Secret Library of the Hummingbird House, and which was published by Affirm Press in 2020. And is a CBCA 2021 notable book. In 2018, she was a recipient of the Australian Society of Authors Emerging Writers Mentorship Award. And in 2014, she was the runners-up in the Sisters in Crime's Scarlet Stiletto Short Story Award. Love that. And in 2015 was a highly commended in the Southern Cross Short Story Award. Julianne works in youth programming for libraries and is represented by Jacinta Damas Literary Agency. And I'm just so excited. And my name is Denise Chapman. I'm a counter story teller, poet, and critical autoethnographer, and I lecture in children's literature and early literacy at Monash University. I've served as a literacy specialist, focusing on critical media literacy in Australia, Fiji, as well as the United States. And I use oral stories, children's literature, and poetry and digital images as counter-narrative windows for social disruption and liberation. So now when I'm not spending time reading children's books, I am involved in also in writing poetry and tweeting. I also love obsessing over Afrofuturistic and sci-fi pop culture media and purchasing children's picture books, Black poetry, and Gala Geechee folk tales. Oh my goodness, what an incredible intro. Yeah, and we're here as a part of the Emerging Writers Festival. And so we could just jump right in there and unpack, I think, this term emergent writer, because it's such a complex one, particularly with children's literature during this time of COVID lockdown. And I would love to see, or to hear rather, your thoughts on the concepts of emerging writers, Julianne and Huda. And I should probably say, let's start with Huda first, and then we'll go to Julianne, and we'll kind of alternate back and forth because we're all so excited to hear from each of you.
So the term emerging writers, hello Denise, and thank you for that beautiful intro as well. And Julianne, so happy to be here with you guys first off. The term emerging writers, I believe it's kind of, I think it's a term that we use, this is my belief, that we have, when someone calls themselves an emerging writer, they've put themselves in a position to say, I'm on my way, I'm on that journey, I'm on that path to get there. I want to be an established writer. It's not something you're out seeking, you're learning, you're writing, you're going to sometimes you'll go to those places where you feel emerging writers should go, like this wonderful festival today. And it's all about the path that you're going to travel. And you're not even at the start, you're like midway there, to go on to be an established writer. That's my belief of an emerging writer. Julianne, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. And I know, Huda, you've had this same feeling of feeling like an imposter even when you've got a book out. I was even too intimidated to open up my copies when they arrived. And my editor used to say, when are you going to call yourself a writer? And I'd be like, oh, this just feels really weird. But I think you're right. I think once you sort of invest in yourself and state that you want to be a writer, the next step is to explore the writing community and what it has to offer you to get better at your craft. So, you know, for me, it was like a light bulb moment that I could invest in myself as a writer and apply for things like the ASA mentorship, which was, you know, essential for me. I think that was just a great way. I had a lovely mentor, Kate Ryan, who's an essayist and novel writer, not necessarily a children's writer, but she mentored me in being in the writing community, in everything writing, which is what I wanted, because for me, it's the confidence factor of saying I'm an emerging writer. I was always too intimidated to go to the Emerging Writers Festival or you know, feeling like, oh, I'm too old because, you know, my first book came out when I was 48. So, you know, it's like you're there sort of thinking that's for young people, you know, and they're all young and amazing. But, you know, I think you can emerge at any age, but you're right. I think there's stages to getting published, and one of them is take yourself seriously. And that's a really scary thing to do, because as soon as you take yourself seriously as a writer, invest in your writing, invest in your craft, discuss writing with people, the stakes suddenly become higher because you've told people that you want to be a writer. So, you know, it is a bit scary. And I can remember whinging to a published writer who I met at a writers' festival, and I can remember saying to her, oh, I've got all these kids and I can't get time to write and I'm working. And she just looked at me and she said, well, you don't have to write. And I was like, oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. You know, and that was like this moment where I went, oh, maybe I am a writer and I better start admitting it, you know.
I love that, because it feels like I could feel you almost pushing back at that. They're like, wait a minute, I'm a writer, you know, and I wonder whether or not that was with intention that she did that.
I think so. She's very smart.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm curious about, you know, sort of jumping into some questions having to do with you all as creatives, you know, and, you know, because you are writers, you are, you know, very, very serious about what you've done. You've got these books that have been published, and I'm just curious, what inspired you to be a writer? What and why children's literature? I think. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go first. I think what inspired me, and if you pick up my book, you'll see it's based on this large family, and the characters in it are, thanks, Julian. There it is. So it's Huda and me. So my first name's in the title. So it's the two main characters are myself and my brother. And I think that we were 7 kids. Mum and Dad were working a lot. So they say write what you know, and that's all I really knew. Like, we were just kind of like looking after ourselves and hanging out together for, you know, our youth. And so they were my inspiration. I really wanted to. I was a journalist, but I found writing for adults not to be as fun. And I loved the concept of being able to return to childhood and you know, feel what the joys and also the pains of childhood and some of the issues and themes, but there's just so much joy in it that we kind of leave behind when we grow up. So that was my main inspiration, I suppose.
I love that. It's almost, I can almost feel you just sort of rolling around in the joy of childhood. And adults can be difficult, you know, kids, that imagination, it's just, you want to jump into it. Julianne, what about you? What inspired you and why children's literature?
Well, like Huda, I think I've always loved writing and always written stories. And one of my formative experiences as a kid was to go to Dromkeen, which was a house that had an exhibition of children's picture book illustrations from people like Jeannie Baker and Graham Base. And it was a wonderful collection. And I can remember coming away from that going, I'm going to be a picture book writer. Like, that's all I wanted to be. But, you know, life takes you on lots of journeys. And, you know, I was always writing, and, you know, I even look back at I went to art school, but I even look back at my art, and they were really storyboards. They were words and pictures. They were never just pictures. They were always in threes with a start, middle, and an end, you know, like.
It's telling me something.
Yeah, it's telling me something. So, yeah, I was always writing, and then I went to film school, and I was making, you know, telling stories through film, and then I was a musician and I was telling stories through songs, and, you know, so I've always been telling stories in lots of different ways. But I think the thing about writing for kids is, one, if you're going to achieve anything, you've got to stop doing a million zillion things like I was doing and knuckle down and do it. And for me, the voice of my book came to me very strongly, and I just started writing it. And because I've been a mum for 28 years now, and been immersed in kids' worlds and schools and school communities and kids' books, you know, I'm always reading kids' books to my kids and with my kids. You know, it was something that I was immersed in anyway, and I think it came naturally to me to understand that world and tell a story in that world.
And, you know, you're talking about aspects of family and reading to your children. And I'm just, you know, in reading both of your books, I'm excited to hear or learn more about, if you don't mind sharing, about the family dynamics that seem to be weaved into, or if it impacts, how does it impact your work, you know, your creations?
I feel like, because Huda and Me is about a big family, absolutely. Like, and even if it wasn't, I feel like it's all part of you. So you naturally, I recall being told at the beginning, stay away from all the things, you know, you have to invent these characters. They have to be completely fictional, and they have to, but I just realized I had to break the rules if I wanted to write the way I wanted to write. It had to have people in it that I know, and then exaggerate those characteristics and personality traits. And like I said, my family is what I really knew. And I recall as a kid, I got in trouble for this. I used to sit in the family room while my siblings were all around, and I used to write notes on them, like little, like, oh, just did this, and just silently. And then someone would catch on and be like, Mom, Huda's writing notes on us again. And so it was just this, I guess it's just in you, right, Julianne? You were saying it's just within you, and your whole path is kind of leading up to this moment, because, yeah, I was doing the teaching, the you know, the primary school teaching and the writing, but then it just all comes together.
And I've got to say, like, the way you represent family life in Huda and Me, it's just so authentic, and it's done in just such delicate little touches, but you get the dynamics between all the kids and all the different ages. And I'm number 7 in my family as well. So I just loved how the whole family dynamics, and how in big families there's almost like little families within, little groups within the big family, and how you just really tapped into that. Yeah, I loved it. But yeah, for me, my book is very much about my first two children, and what they experienced when I broke up with their dad, and we did an arrangement which we called Week About, which was a week with mum and a week with dad. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. And you know, I wanted to turn that experience that they went through, which had good times and bad because it's life, into something special, into something beautiful for them. And yeah, so I think it was very much inspired by that voice that came to me, which was my eldest child being worried that she wouldn't recognize me when I came to pick her up because I'd been gone for a whole week. And I might have changed my hair color and be wearing a wig, and maybe something really bad has happened to me. And, you know, and she just used to be really stressed because she was separated from each of her parents for a whole week, and it was really stressful for her. And, you know, that just came to me so strongly, and that understanding of that I just wanted to write that for her and for her sister, but also maybe for other kids that are going through that.
Yes, yes. And I remember before from our previous conversations, which we've had some delicious and juicy conversations, you were talking about, both of you were talking about the importance of being able to write what you know, and that, you know, Julianne, you had talked about the hand, you know, that you know the details of your hand, you want, or you know the details of your life, you know the details of your circumstance, and what it feels like to be, you know, potentially for your daughter, which I think your main character, Hattie, is the rhyme, you know, a rhyming word for, you know, with your daughter's first name. I just realized I don't want to throw her name out there, but you know, that she was inspired by that, and so I think writing what you know is really, you know, of importance. And I'm wondering, you know, what do you hope that people who purchase your books, that read your books with their children, or that their children read the books, what do you hope they get out of the book? Huda, what are you hoping that, because each of your books, I mean, touches on some really powerful stuff. What are you hoping they get out of it?
I think it's, at the end of the day, it's just an adventure story, and it's a story about two Aussie kids who just kind of want to do something. Well, one in particular wants to do something that's just outrageous and crazy, and she takes her brother along with her. So at its essence, that's really all it is. But there are lots of layers that came out very organically as I was writing, and it was, you know, there's the Muslim factor, the Arab factor, Lebanese in particular, there's their age, the big family. So there's all these layers upon it that come out in the writing. And I suppose it was really trying to reach not just all Aussie kids, but, you know, those particular Aussie kids who might have a Lebanese background and a Muslim background, and let them see themselves in a character, because it's rare that, let's be honest, it's sad and it's rare that we have such a we have these kinds of kids. Even in Julianne's book, reading about one of the characters, and I was, when I saw, I hope I don't want to spoil it or anything. Okay. One of the characters is Lebanese, and she was there all along, well, for a little while in the story, and then it popped out that she had this Lebanese background. And because it's set in a certain place at a certain time, of course, there would be a Lebanese kid in the story in that period and in that space. Yeah. So it's about being relatable, and having something that kids can, not just the Lebanese and Muslim kid can pick up and relate to, but also that another child can say, oh yeah, there's a kid in my class who's from XYZ, and oh yeah, the kid across the road or next door, the kid I go to footy with is, and just making it more real and just normal, because it is.
Yes, and not to dive too much into your family dynamics, but I mean, the character in your book is named Huda, and you know, and that's at the front of your book, and people may have noticed that your name as the author is not in, you know, it's in the title of the book, but as an author, you know, the author isn't, and I'm curious about. You know, we were talking about before about your brother and yourself, and how the different things that the dynamics within your family and how exciting it was. And I feel like I would love for you to share a little bit more about that within the book. So it's, and tying it in, because it's not just about, as you said, here's a child who's a brother and sister, Muslim background from Melbourne, but they are they're brothers and sisters and doing brother and sister things. Yeah,
that's it. I'll cover the first bit first.
Yes.
So the reason we it's a big question.
I just went all over, didn't I?
But it's good. I think so. We discussed about changing the characters' names, the publisher and I felt that when I write for these names. These names a name makes a person sometimes. So it was important for me to keep those names. And so but the risk was that by keeping Huda Hayek as the author name, it might look like an autobiography, which it isn't. I mean, there is some realistic things in there, but it's not based on a true story that happened. So we opted to just put my initial instead, so there would be no confusion for the younger audience. And in terms of the connection between the brother and the sister and the relationship between them, that was I suppose very true, because we grew up, Akil was always the good one, and I was always the bad one, and he was always the one who is praying and fasting, or he was just, you just don't believe that little boys exist. And I know he's not watching right now, so I can say nice things about him because he's in a conference. But he was always, and he never gave me a fish. He always wanted to teach me how to fish. And there is 18 months between us. So he would frustrate me, but he taught me so much, because he was always the baseline of good and everything that is good, and trying to make me, calmer, and trying to get me to do the right thing. And we fought like cats and dogs up until I left home. And I think once I left home and moved to States, it's when I saw the world, I realized, hey, you don't get brothers like that all the time. Like he was something special. And I think we kind of grew into each other in the end. He kind of, he mellowed, and I kind of mellowed as well. And so there was that real, and another thing I'll say is that I didn't realize our connection was anything special until one of my sisters said it in passing, and she was like, oh yeah, everybody knows that you and Akil have a special bond. I was like, oh, do we? And so it was, yeah. So then I think it was just an accumulation of many years and many experiences between us that kind of created that relationship that I put into the book.
And that just, it's so apparent. I mean, you can feel it. It took me back to even my experiences with my brothers, and and one, I have a favorite brother. I will not be saying which one it is, but he knows. He knows. And Julianne, tell us. I mean, your book. I mean, it dives into some, this topic of divorce. But, I mean, this is something that that this is your lemonade album, if you will, taking those lemons and making them into lemonade. And you've got a really interesting setting for the book, everything from the mansion, the mulberry tree, and the library. Tell us a little bit about that setting, and also about those dynamics, those family dynamics that about your characters, the inspiration behind them.
Yeah, you're right. I did want to make something good out of something that wasn't so good that happened in our lives. And it was hard for the kids. And I wanted them to know that I know, I got it. I understand. I know it was hard for them. I think one of the particular things is, as a single mum, I relied on my eldest child a lot to help me with the younger child who was not behaving so well. And, your eldest child, she's only a little bit older, but I was always relying on her to help me, deal with your sister. And that's really unfair. But in stressful situations in families, often we do what's necessary to get through. And I sort of wanted to let them both know that I get that. I know that. I know I relied too heavily on the eldest child. But in terms of the setting, I wanted to set it in Brunswick because I've lived in Brunswick a long time, and it's such a dynamic place. And there's we used to live above shops on Sydney Road, and you'd be going down the road and they'd love smelling the icing sugar on the air, from the Lebanese shops, and it was just such a vibrant place to grow up, and for the kids, and so busy, and something always happening. And then I started looking into a bit of the history around where I was living, and there was this magnificent mansion that was there once, and I thought it had burned down and was gone, but the coach house remained. And I kept thinking, what if that house was still there, that beautiful mansion? And I sort of drew on a lot of books that I loved as a kid, and I did probably put sort of all these elements in that I love about children's literature, which is climbing magical trees, and and that it's and old spooky houses, and exploring the world, and all of those sorts of things. And in fact, I had an email from a kid who read my book, and I had an email this week, and she said, "Your book is my favorite book because authors sometimes spread out all their ideas, but you put them all into this book."
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And I was like, yeah, I kind of did put everything into this book.
It's your heart. It's the Lemonade album. That's right. Look, I really feel inspired with everything that you all have shared. I mean, and I think the authenticity of your books really shines. I mean, it is something as a parent as well as a teacher educator. I mean, this is a book that I can say to teachers, to pre-service teachers, to parents, these are books that your children should be reading, but I wanted to kind of jump a little bit. I've got 3 more questions, or maybe depending on time, maybe one or 2 more questions. I'm just curious, do you have any tips? I mean, you've been working on this book, it's out there. These books, what would you recommend to other authors or other writers? Do you have any recommendations for them, for new writers? You've gone on this journey and getting this out. Any recommendations for them?
I would say you have to learn the trade, like you have to learn the craft. You have to learn what's going on, and it's the way that I did course after course after course to kind of learn what I didn't know, because there is bad writing and there's good writing, and you want to be able to say, I've got a really good piece here, I've got a good story, and give it justice through all those techniques and things that you'll learn. Aside from that, just write, just keep writing, because we can get so caught up in our own minds and overthink and perfection and being fearful of what the next step is, even of success sometimes. So just keep writing. Don't hold back. That would be my 2 pieces of advice.
And
beautiful.
I agree with that. And I'd just like to say the craft in your book, Huda, is amazing. I love the structure particularly, and we're going to have coffee and talk about that. Look, I would say to people, value your story, value what you know. If that's what you want to write about, value that. And do your best with those things that you want to write about. I would say read in that genre. I would perhaps warn them that it's an industry. Publishing is an industry. But I would also tell them, do not compare your work to a finished product on a bookshelf, because so much work from so many people goes to turn my writing into a packaged book. Like the designers, the editors, so many people help produce that book. So, you're writing on your own, have faith in your stories, keep going, value what you're writing about, understand where your writing fits if you want it published, where it fits in the industry, and do a bit of research around that. But value what you know.
I'll add one more.
Yeah.
I'll add one more thing to that, if that's okay, Denise. Someone special, my editor actually told me this, and she said, and this was just before she became my editor, and she was saying, and I was really stressed about the publication process and if my manuscript would be accepted. And she said, your worth isn't tied to this one thing. You're so much more than this one thing. This is a big thing for you, but it's not, your value is not in this manuscript. You're infinite and more than that. And I really wish I had absorbed that fully. And I want people to know that as well, that you're just, whatever happens, you're amazing and you're great. It's not about just this one thing.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, you could get so tethered down into, you know, this one piece. And if you put it out there, you pitch it to someone and they go, meh. I mean, I can see it being devastating.
And that's the other thing. Put yourself out there, but learn to cope with rejection. Yeah. I can't tell you how many rejections I've had of submissions to things, you know, just I almost like to have so many out that I'm not even waiting for a reply, you know, like just don't, it hurts. The rejections always hurt, but there's lots of reasons you get rejected. It might just not be right for that publisher or that journal, or, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean your writing is terrible and your life is over, like I always think when I'm rejected. You know, you can have some perspective on this stuff, and but I would say, you know, like we said at the start saying, I'm a writer. Yeah. This is what I want to do, and use the wonderful resources that are around us. And we're so lucky in Melbourne, and invest in yourself, invest in your craft. Don't think you can do it on your own out of nowhere. You know, get help. It's there. Yeah. And you know, like Huda said, work on your craft and you know, use the writing community to help you.
I feel so inspired. I'm sitting here and I have to, you know, keep myself from just sort of falling in and just listening to you all. I'm like, that's right. I am a writer. That's right. You know, I am a writer. Hey, I think one of the big things for each of your books is the power of inclusivity and representation here. You know, that if I were to look at your books and I would say, oh, I see it. I see it here. And I'm just wondering if you could shed some light on your books in terms of how you see it speaking to representation or inclusivity. You know, how is it seen in your book? And or maybe even why you think it's an important link to your book. Maybe Julianne or Huda? Yeah, Huda, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. I think it's important because kids need to see people who are not just like them. They need to know that, you know, because we don't live in a perfect world, and there are things like racism and bigotry, and there are awful things that happen to people who are different. So kids need to see that this is all part of life, and these are the, you know, whatever, different people exist everywhere you go, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that's just the really basic version of why seeing diversity in books is important. When I wrote my story, when I sat down at the computer at midnight with my now 7-year-old who was just a baby asleep, I wasn't thinking about all this stuff. I just wanted to tell a story about 2 kids from a big family. And all that other stuff, when it's real and when it's particularly with own voice stories, all that stuff, all those layers come out, all the themes about, you know, diversity, racism, inclusivity, they just come out, they're natural. So I think a lot of people don't set out just to say, I'm going to write a book about diversity and include an Indigenous person and a person from a Mediterranean, and no, they don't. Most people don't do that. But if you're writing and you have a story to tell, all of these layers will come up.
Yes, yes, yes. And I mean, it's so important to be able to, Dr. Rudy and Sims Bishop talks about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, and that children need to be able to see their mirrors, but they also need to be able to have those windows where they're seeing things from different perspectives. Being able to have those sliding glass doors to enter into spaces that they ordinarily wouldn't have the opportunity to, and that this is important not just for this is not just for the BIPOC community to be able to see themselves, but for people who are the majority to be able to see the range of diversity and what it has to offer. And Julianne, I think that we talked previously about the importance of class and the importance of family structure and being able to see that being represented. Can you share more about that? And I mean, in terms of representation, I feel like we've been talking about this a couple of times. I love our conversations, and so, but can you share a little bit more?
Yeah, and as I just like to say from a library perspective, from my work background, we know that kids reading, and we know that adult reading develops empathy. And if you think that these kids are developing their empathy while they're reading, well, of course they need to be reading diverse stories. That's a window there, Denise, that's open, in their heart while they're reading, for them to empathize. That's what reading is. You're putting yourself in that character's position. And so, of course, we need diverse characters and diverse narratives for kids to be able to open all those windows and develop their empathy in a really strong way. In terms of setting my book in my backyard and setting it in Brunswick and things like that. Part of that is I want people to know that their backyard is book worthy. Their story is worthy of a book on a shelf.
Yes.
I don't care where it is. I grew up in like the dinkiest small town, but it's book worthy. Your story is book worthy because it's not just about the place; it's about the people and the characters and the story. So I really wanted to set something right where I lived, and I've already had kids in Brunswick, say to me, "Oh, I think I know that phone box, and I think I know that tree," and things like that, and it shows them that magic can happen, not in that sort of hippie magic can happen, but that there's wonder in their backyard. Kids always ask you, where did your inspiration come from? And I say, the house on the corner or the tree down the street. It comes from your neighborhood and your world is special. And I wanted to really affirm that with kids. And in terms of the family dynamics, I was a single mom with my kids and we were really poor. I did have a landlord that I lied to and that I said that I didn't have kids. And when we did see him down the street, which we always did because it was Brunswick, I did used to say, call me auntie in front of that man. Don't call me mum. And they'd say, but you are our mum, aren't you? And they'd get really confused, and I put things like that in the book because they're real when your housing situation is precarious. If you lose your school jumper, mum can't buy another one. And kids get stressed about that sort of thing. That's real in kids' lives. And I wanted to include those realities in the book as well, because I just think so many of the books, the kids go to these fancy schools or they've got all this stuff or and again it's that thing of seeing yourself on the page in a book, to know that your story is valuable, your story is worthwhile, and I wanted kids to be empowered by that. And then other kids, like you said, Huda, they can experience all of these other worlds as well.
Yes. And I mean, in many ways, the context is character, isn't it? I mean, and it's that character or that setting has just as much right to be in the range of media that children absorb as others. So I'm so loving this, and I'm wondering maybe if we have a short period of time that we could just maybe share some excerpts of your books. Huda, would you, or Julianne, would you, who would like to go? I feel
You go
like
first,
I might.
Huda.
Okay.
I got to put my glasses on.
All right, Julia. I'll get you next time. How much time do we have, Denise? Just so I don't
I
overread.
think that for each of us, we're trying to do this in 10 minutes, 9 minutes. So maybe 3 or 2 or 3
cool.
minutes, and we could talk about it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
So 2 minutes.
I'll just read from the first chapter, because this is probably my favorite chapter, and it's the first that I wrote, and it's one of the chapters that hasn't changed very much through the editing process. So the first chapter is called The Airport. She's sitting in the airport lounge, fiddling with our tickets. I can tell she's excited because she has a little smile on her face, and she keeps glancing at her pink digital watch. I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe we're running away from home. Well, we're not really running away. We'll come back. We're running to our parents on the other side of the world. We're getting out of Melbourne because it all became too much, at least for Huda, and I'm an idiot for agreeing to go with her. But I need to make sure she doesn't do anything stupid or get herself into some kind of mess. We'll be dead meat if we're caught before we reach Lebanon. We'll be in trouble with Aunt Amal, with our principal, and with the police. Not to mention what Mum and Dad will do if they find out before we can explain. Thinking about it now makes me nervous. I check the time on my watch, 15 minutes until boarding. Huda's looking at the red tag around her neck, trying to read the words. I can see her lips moving as she sounds out the letters. Akil, she calls out to me, more loudly than she needs to. She's sitting with her legs crossed on the fancy purple couch opposite me, like she's watching telly at home. Her school backpack is on the floor next to her, half open. 2 dolls' heads poke out. I told her not to pack any toys. What's unaccompanied minor mean? Unaccompanied. I want to tell her it means someone who goes to pee without help. It means you don't have an adult with you, I say, shaking my head. She looks at me with her black eyes and smiles, a naughty smile. She knows her plan is going perfectly. Huda might not be the smartest kid in her class, but I don't know any other 9-year-old who would steal a credit card and convince an airline to let her fly to the other side of the world. As I sigh at my little sister, the announcement is made. All children travelling on flight XFL 60 to Lebanon, please board the gate now. Huda grins. She grabs her bag and zips it shut. Then she pulls her crumpled plane ticket from her pocket and tries to smooth the creases from it. She looks at me, still smiling. I want to stick my fingers in her dimples and see how deep they'll go. Are you ready, brother? In a way, she says the word brother to tease me, but I know she's also reminding me that I have to stay with her because she's 2 years younger than me. I guess so. Let's see if they actually let us on this plane. Huda doesn't wait for me while I pull my own plane ticket out of my pocket. In the flash of an eye, she's in the queue with the other kids waiting to board. The problem is, all those kids are with their parents. You might even think Huda was part of someone's family, the way she's standing there, looking around with such excitement on that round, chubby face. I catch up to her and she whispers in my ear, almost there, Akil, almost there. She giggles, but I feel like wetting myself. And I'll stop there.
I can't help but laugh because every aspect of that I can see. It's so visual, it's so juicy, and again reminding me of the dynamics between my brothers, even my sister, and those moments, that you kind of pick on your sibling, but other things, having to do with, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, but we are doing what we need to do. And what do you think, Julianne?
One of the huge powers in Huda's book is, like I said, the way she writes such authentic family relationships, but also the perspective, the POV. So writing about Huda through Akil's eyes is just like it's the perfect show don't tell. So we see Huda, and at the same time we get to know Akil, and it's just magic. I love it, and and that sort of problem solving that you show that the kids do in your book, Huda, like they've been put in this terrible situation And and Huda problem solves it, and that's really empowering. She really just goes, right, I'm going to do something about this, and I really love that empowerment in your book. And I wanted to do something similar in mine, where my character is very anxious, but I wanted to show that anxiety isn't necessarily this thing that inhibits you from doing things and needs to be fixed. That her anxiety comes because she cares so much and so deeply about things, and that's a power. You just have to know how to use it.
That's right.
And so once she sort of discovers that she must save Hummingbird House, she has a cause, but that came from her anxiety. That she cared so much. And I really think, both our books have that way where we show kids in a very empowered way, changing the world.
Yeah, we're not waiting for the adults to do it.
No,
they're getting out there and they're doing it. And kids do that, obviously not to the scale in both our books, but that kids are capable and they can make these choices and they can fix their own problems. Even if they have, these obstacles, and you're in with Hattie, it's the divorce and also the anxiety, and with Huda and Akil, it's the horrible babysitter and the things that they're made to do. But through that, they persevere and they get there. And I think there's a message in that.
I think. And I think too often, we see kids as being upset or anxious about things as this thing that we've got to stop or fix, when really that's just life. Let's get upset about things that are wrong. Yeah. Sometimes we're going to be upset, And
that makes you feel, it makes you feel like, this is a superpower as opposed to a problem. And then it, you end up collapsing, or it's who does I'm cheeky, I'm clever, but this is something that I'm going to be able to harness into I've got a goal in mind and I'm going to achieve it. Julianne, I would love to hear from a little bit of from Hummingbird House, because
I'll do the same thing. I'll read the first bit that I wrote to Huda that was later changed, and this came to me so strongly one day that I was on a train and I had no paper or pen because I'm a terrible writer and I never have papers and pens, so I had to type it into my phone. I typed it into my phone. It just came to me, so strongly. So this is when Hattie's waiting for her mum to pick her up. Okay. So, are you okay, Hattie? You look kind of stressed, Patrick says. I'm waiting for my mum, I answer. Why isn't she here yet? The bell only just went, says Patrick reassuringly. Do you want me to distract you with my latest tap routine? I don't answer, but I can hear that Patrick has taken my silence for a yes. I stand on tiptoe to see over the crowd of students and parents. For some other kids, spotting their mum would be easy peasy lemon squeezy. But for me, it's different. I haven't seen my mum for a whole week. Yep, 7 whole days and 7 whole nights. Not since Monday morning when she dropped me off at school and kissed me goodbye and gave me a really, 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 picture me here squashed in her arms and gasping for air, extra long hug. Or maybe it was the other way round, me giving her a really, 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 really extra long hug. I had to flutter my tongue in my mouth and say tra-la-la-la-la very fast and quietly to myself so I didn't cry. All around me, I see kids getting picked up in a blur as though time has been sped up. Patrick's mum is on the other side of the hall. She always wears a big, colourful headscarf, and in fact, I would use a special vocabulary word from last week's list and say that she is statuesque. There are heaps of kids in his family, all boys with black frizzy hair. She makes a come-on gesture with her arm, and they all flock together like a bunch of birds. See you tomorrow, Hattie, Patty calls as he high kicks across the hall and is swooped up into the whirl of it all. As I wave back, I can't help but think how easy it looks to be in a big family. I guess you're wondering why I haven't seen my mum for a whole week. Maybe you think I've been on school camp or sailing around the Bahamas with friends or on a secret mission to find the Loch Ness Monster or in Antarctica counting penguins or competing in the World Stone Skimming Championship. It's a real thing, okay? Look it up. I wish, but it's nothing like that. You see, I do this thing called Weekabout. That's what we call it. We, as in me, mum, dad, and my little sister Ivy, week about, because one week I'm at dad's house and the next week I'm at mum's house. And if you think that sounds okay, then you really haven't thought it through.
I love it.
See, this is the vocabulary. I mean, being able to give them, this is what they call it, and it's okay. And this feeling of, 7 whole days. And maybe as an adult, you might go, well, yeah, 7 days, that's not a big deal. But for children, it's 7 whole days. And I'm not quite sure how mom looks. Mm-hmm. Am I going to recognize her? Oh gosh. I mean, and the point of view again, here, coming from her, but also talking to, the reader and saying, hey, you're probably wondering why this is. Do you see, what are your thoughts? Because I can feel, I almost want both the characters from Julianne, from your book, and
oh my God, they take on the world, wouldn't they? Hattie and Huda, I love it.
What would they do? What wouldn't they do?
What wouldn't they do?
Yeah.
Hattie would be the brains. Huda would just be the one with the, the dare.
Sparkle.
Yeah. And Hattie would be the smart one who's coming up with the plans, and Huda would execute them. What I really love about when I first read that, the two things that really struck me were the imagery. Like I feel like even just listening back to it, I feel like I'm there. I can see it. I can see what Hattie sees. I can see, I'm out there. I'm out there after school and I'm waiting with her, and I can see those other kids. The other thing that strikes me is the comparison. It's not just Patrick. It's Patrick who has this whole family, and how that reflects. It's a beautiful way how you showed Hattie's, the fracture within her, because there's someone who has that wholeness, and someone whose mum is a certain way and their family is a certain way, and the brothers, and they're all the same. But Hattie doesn't have that. And I feel like that's so, she doesn't have any resentment towards that. She loves Patrick, but it just shows that there is just something hard for Hattie. And I just feel like that comparison just really, if it wasn't there, it just wouldn't work. So I just love those two things about that opening part.
I'm it's so juicy. I just juiciness. And I think the thing that I'm excited about, my daughter started reading both of your books, and we're trying to have that nighttime reading moment, because I'm trying to, she's 11. Okay. She's Hattie's age. Okay. And so I'm trying to spend that time with her, because I can see her, she's growing up, but this is a space. The book is this, each of the books are a space for us to have these deep conversations. It's not just, about what's going on in her life, but being able to talk about these things that she's seeing in the book and tease them out. And maybe, how do you feel about this? Even brainstorming and critiquing, would you do something different? How do you feel?
And that's it, isn't it? When kids are reading a book, they do think, what if? What if I was doing that? What if this happened to me? And I think both Huda's book and mine, it has these kids in situations where the adult decision making has put them in this situation. Hattie didn't choose to do Week About. Hattie didn't choose for her parents to break up. Huda and Akil, they didn't choose for their parents to go overseas and be stuck with their auntie, And, there is this sense that, kids can be disempowered all the time by school rules and by library rules and by all of these things in life that sort of can box them in. And, when they're reading a book, I really wanted to write stories that shows that they can be empowered through story, empowered in find some ways to have this agency. And I think both our books have that in common, Huda.
I agree. And even in terms of Hattie with the big split, I feel that even if a child, if their parents are still together, I don't want to give away too much of it, but then later on there's a character who worries that their parents might be splitting up.
And that used to happen to my daughter. She was known as like the divorce expert because her parents had split up. So other kids would consult her.
And then should be like, nah, they're good. They're good.
She knew the signs.
If their parents were going through a big split, then, you know, she'd run that path before them, and she had the advice. That's so heavy. Oh my goodness. But
she could shift it around as an expert. You know, it's like, well, I'm an expert here in this space that I'm building her own capacity and her own agency, thinking, this might be a lot, but, you know, I mean, almost shifting it. I'm sorry, Huda, you were just about to say something, and I just jumped in there.
I was just saying, even for the child who reads this book, whose parents are together, it's a reflection later on where you see, you know, some of the signs and some of the process that you might go through if you thought your parents were going through a split. So it covers both very gently and very, very tactfully, I felt. And I loved, like, there was certain things that Hattie says later where she kind of crosses the boxes, not ticks them. She's like, nah, because of this. And so I don't want to say anymore because I think I'll just blow the whole story.
But I think, you know, kids do learn emotional intelligence through going through things. You know, it's the same. Absolutely. It's the same for Akil, who just can read his sister's moods. He can read, you know, when Huda, and I don't want to say too much either, but, you know, like when someone's mean to Huda, he knows instantly. He knows instantly from her face that something has happened, you know, and, you know, that beautiful emotional intelligence that children have that adults can sometimes neglect or perhaps not validate. And, you know, I think in children's literature, we validate children's emotional intelligence. We value their empowerment and their sense of adventure. And we do it through writing a good story. But, you know, we are telling kids your feelings matter, your intuition matters, you know, all of those things.
Because in life, sorry, Denise, in life, kids are overlooked, where children are overlooked so much. Mum's busy, mum's in the kitchen, she's trying to make dinner, dad's at work, there's 25 other kids in a classroom. If you're feeling embarrassed or something bad is happening to you, the teacher's not going to, unless she's, you know, got the time, the resources and the intuition, she's not going to pick up on it. So that's you're right, Julianne, I agree with that wholeheartedly, that these books give kids the space to feel and it's expressed in its entirety, whereas it wouldn't be perhaps in everyday life.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about Huda's book is that, you know, that exploration of not being from the same place as your parents. You know, that disconnect from where your parents are from, that first generation experience, which, you know, I don't know if I've seen that so beautifully written in this for this age group. You know, I just thought that was beautiful.
Yes. And, you know, and I think giving a sense of belonging, of, you know, it's okay. And even a space for parents to be able to, if they're reading this alongside their child, being able to see it as a venue to talk about, you know, how do you feel? You know, I know in my case with my young daughter, you know, I've got family overseas, you know, and being able to talk about things like, you know, with COVID, we were very nervous about, you know, my parents, and this is a space to be able to talk about these things, you know, living abroad or living, you know, or family living abroad, or even the dynamics of the context that we're in, and how we're feeling, that it's a space. Well, I'm just looking here, and we're close to wrapping up here. I think we've got maybe about 2 more minutes to go, and I'm dying to ask you all, what are you currently reading? We've been talking about your books, and I'm just curious if we could, you know, what are you currently reading?
Well, I just finished Julianne's book, and I just bought it. I wish I had a copy, but I got it on my phone because it's just easy to access, you know, wherever I am. But I'm also reading this one at the moment, so The F-Team by.
I love that book.
Yeah, so I'm halfway. I've had to stop reading it at times, so I could read other things, but that's the base one. So I'm about halfway through and I'm just loving it. I just love the characters. I love the difference. I like that the difference is normal.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I've seen the author of the F Team talk about, and she's from a big family where she's got heaps of brothers, and so that's and she's written about the boys. I loved that book. I'm actually reading a grown-up book at the moment, which is very unlike me, but I'm reading Too Much Lip by Melissa Lushenko and just loving that. And I'm about to start reading an old classic. So as a bit of research. So I'm not going to say any more.
Well, ladies, I feel like we've had so many conversations before this conversation, and in some ways, you go, oh goodness, you want to get the juiciness out of all the conversations into one. And I think that I just want to thank you so much for the time, and to all of those watching online. I had my eye on Twitter as well, and they're posting things on Twitter, and really, really excited. And I just warmest thank you to Huda, author of Huda and Me, and Julianne, author of The Secret Library of Hummingbird House.
There they are.
And there they are. We've got the Kindle versions, right? So y'all go out there and get these incredible books from these incredible authors. And we just want to really give a shout out and a huge thank you to the Emerging Writers Festival 2021 for making this all possible. Just really grateful that you all were able to join us today for the Lunchtime Lit, Writing for Children, because they're the future, right? I know that sounds like cliche, but it's powerful stuff. Thank you, Julianne. Thank you, Huda.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks, Huda.
Thanks so much.